Boker Tov, today's daf is Daf Lamed Beis in Nizir. Daf Lamed Beis. Yesterday we saw the Mishnah at the bottom of Lamed Aleph and Beis. Talked about a case where a person became a Nizir and he wasn't sure if he became a Nizir. He thought he wasn't, so he started to ask the Talmud Chacham to be mater, and they said, no, you were wrong because you violated your Nazir. So you thought you weren't a Nazir. You thought you weren't, your words weren't important, or what you said wasn't exact, but you were, and because of that, they said you're punished. And so what does it say? He has to start counting from the time that he made his Naziris. Well, that sounds like a kula, meaning he started, let's say his Naziris, let's take a simple month like April, okay? Got 30 days. He said on April 1st he's Nazir, and he didn't think he was serious, and he started drinking wine. Came to the rabbis. The rabbi said, you shouldn't have done that, and you have to continue counting. But it sounds like Misho'ah Shenodar, from the time that he started on April 1st. So there doesn't seem to be any punishment involved. Just continue. That's what it sounds like. Okay. The Mishnah went on to talk about other issues. If he got a heter and he had an animal set aside, so we say over there that it's not really, the animal can go back in the flock because he got a heter and the whole Naziris is uprooted retroactively. We went on to the machlokas that is related to the machlokas Beishamai, so we'll talk about it more in the Gemara. But as far as the first part goes, if he said, I want to be a Nazir on April 1st, and he thought he wasn't serious, he wasn't sure, he violated his Naziris, he drank wine. Rashi brings down that he went Talmud Lamason. That makes it more complicated because then for sure he'd have to start all over again. But from the way the Mishnah sounds, it's like he was drinking wine and said, okay, just continue. So the Gemara says right away at the top of Lamed Beis, money must be some low Rabbi Yossi Rabbanan. How does this Mishnah go? It doesn't go like Rabbi Yossi Rabbanan. What do you mean? It just continues counting from April 1st and April 30th is over? The Tanya, Misha Nader Va'avar al Nizus, a person made a Naziris and he violated his Naziris. He violated on purpose. We don't even give him any attention. We don't turn our attention to, meaning we don't listen to find a Pesach opening for his Naziris. Ella imkain, unless he starts counting again. In other words, noeg by nisr. He has to, let's say from April 1st till April 10th, he drank wine. So he said, you know what? You better make up those 10 days and start over again, basically, right? If you haven't, for the first 10 days he drank wine, you better count. Or if, let's say the first 10 days he didn't drink wine, but the next 10 days he drank wine, well, he's got to make up for those days. So that's what the Tanna Kama says. Rabbi Yossi Omer Dayav Shlashim, it's enough 30 days. What do you mean 30 days? What? Pardon?
30 days from when?
From when? Exactly. From then. From then he has to get 30 days. So why 30 days? What does it mean? Rabbanan, if you go like the Rabbanan would say, you have to make up the time, so to speak, the time that you were a bad boy, you have to make that up. So Kasha Naziris Moetes. Rashi explains this, even as if whatever Naziris was, if it was 30 days or 100 days, the Mishnah seems to say, no, he just continues counting from the day that he started, from the time Misho'ah Shenada, from April 1st, just continue. Well, the Rabbanan say over here in the Mishnah, in this Brisa, that no, you don't give him any attention. We don't turn attention until he makes up the time. So the Kasha Naziris, either any kind of Naziris, he says Muetas, but even Muetas, because Rabbi Yossi, we're going to ask on a large one. Rabbi Yossi, Kasha Naziris Maruba. If it's Rabbi Yossi, what do you mean? Rabbi Yossi says 30 days. 30 days what? From now, keep 30 more days. What happens if it was a large? It said happens in Naziris for 100 days. And now he violated, so he only has to keep 30 more days. What does that mean? So the Gemara says, Ibois and Rabbi Yossi, Ibois and Rabbanan. We could either say it goes like Ibois Tema. Again, the Lashon in Nazir is sort of like Yerushalmi, and that's why we'll see it again here later on in the daf here, that the Gemara, the Lashon is a little bit different. It's more like Yerushalmi. Ibois, not Ibois Ema. If not, if you Ibois, if I want Ema, I will say, or Ibois Tema, you could say. Tema means you could say. Ibois Tema Rabbi Yossi, Ibois Tema Rabbanan. You can go like Rabbi Yossi or like Rabbanan. I could say our Mishnah goes like either one now. Ibois Tema Rabbi Yossi. If you could tell, I could tell Rabbi Yossi. Kam Benaziris Maruba, Kam Benazir Muetes. Says Rashi, all right, that what does it mean? Must the Mishnah speaking about a large Naziris, a large time Naziris, meaning Brisa Benazir Muetes. But the Chum said, what said, you say that you start counting in the Brisa. You start saying you count as many days as he violated, right? But the days that he violated don't count for his Naziris. So you got to make up those days. Omer ani daim shloshim yom. I say it's enough 30 days. You may Isser Olam in a minyan. In other words, I go like the Mishnah, that the days that is count for days, from the time that he's in it's like I like the time of the Mishnah, meaning that the Mishnah speaker, when he says over here 30 days, that's for a small Naziris. If it's a small Naziris, so you just you count 30 days and that's it. The Mishnah speaking about where he said I'm going to be a Nazir for 100 days. So from 100 days, he's got to count the whole 100 days, but going back to the beginning. In other words, he doesn't lose out the time that he violated. The time that he violated doesn't have to be made up. Just keep the whole thing. You started. The Mishnah said you started for 100 days. You violated part of it. Okay, just keep going. Just continue on. Proceed as go. Contribution. No penalty. He said he made a mistake.
Start over again.
Okay, so that's when he was tamei, when he became tamei. When he became tamei, you have to start all over again for sure. That's why I said Rashi says being tamei. That's not exact. You have to say that Rashi wasn't talking about this exact case. I don't know, or it's not Rashi as they say. But let's say he was drinking wine. And he was drinking wine. He wasn't tamei. When you have to count all over again is when you become tamei mace. But if you just drank wine, you violated, drank wine. You weren't supposed to. Do you have to count all over again or not? So if the Mishnah says you don't have to count over, just you started April 1st, just keep going. Okay, you're a bad boy, keep going. So the Charli Gemara says that doesn't go like Rabbi Yossi or like Rabbanan, because Rabbanan say you have to make up the time in the Brisa. That's what the Rabbanan say in the Brisa. And Rabbi Yossi says 30 days. Just keep 30 days. So what is that? It doesn't sound like we just keep going. The answer is 30 days is if it's a regular small Naziris, just keep going 30 days. If it's a long Naziris, then you got to make it the whole time according to Rabbi Yossi. Back in the Gemara, Vivais Tema Rabbanan, or I could say Rabbanan, Lo Tema Mishash Nazir. Don't read the Mishnah that you count from April 1st, from the time you made the Naziris. Elama Kim Mishash Nazir. When you started April 1st, what did you say? 30 days, right? We'll give you 30 days. That is the usual time that they give, right? Nazir is 30 days. I'll give you 30 days. He says, you know what? If you came and you said, listen, I've been drinking wine, I didn't think it was serious. They said, no. Nishal Chacham Asru Mona Mishash. Chacham said, "We're not." He didn't get a Taras Adar, right? Because he was a bad boy. So it doesn't mean that he starts counting. He just keeps going from April 1st till April 30th. Not Mishash and Nazar from April 1st, but rather Kimishash and Nazar. Just like when he made the Naziris on April 1st, it was for 30 days. He's still got to keep another clean 30 days now. In other words, the Mishnah goes like the Rabbanan who say you have to make up the time. If you were a bad boy, you got to make it up and you have to keep it going. So if he was let's say he started April 1st and he went till April 10th and he was okay, didn't drink anything. Then for the next 10 days, he drank wine. He came to the rabbi and said, look, I can't do this anymore. Was I really a Nazir? And they said, oh, you're a bad boy. You ruined those 10 days. You got to keep another 10 days to make it up. Not talking about a case of Tumah, because in case of Tumah, you got to start all over again, right? You got to bring the Karbanos of Tumah, the birds, 7 days of Tumah, purify yourself, bring the birds and the Asham, start all over again. Presumably, here we're talking about just when you're drinking, you drank wine, you were a bad boy. So the Rabbanan Taka say in the Mishnah, and that's how we'll learn the Mishnah, that it doesn't mean literally that there's no penalty. There's no penalty. There is a penalty. You got to make up those days. And Rabbi Yossi, or you can say the Mishnah is like Rabbi Yossi. No, you go back to April 1st, but you start from the beginning. If it's a short Naziris, then you just keep the 30 days, but you keep it. But you don't have to start all over here. You don't have to make up the days according to Rabbi Yossi. So either way, you could learn the Mishnah. Nishla Chacham Bitur. Let's say he went to the Chacham and they were matrim. So the Mishnah went on to say, he went to the rabbis, and the rabbi said, okay, we understand you made a mistake. You as we paskin, you just regret it. Posting the charata, you weren't over, but you were over. Maybe you weren't, maybe over. They were matrim. The unfortunately seemed to say that when they were matrim, because he didn't violate it. We just made a mistake. He says, I thought I could be a Nazir and I can't. So Rashi says, B'shamar atzmo kol good. And then he went to the Chacham. In other words, he didn't violate it. April 1st, he said he's a Nazir. By April 15th, he couldn't take it anymore. He went to the rabbis and they found the Pesach for him. Okay, but meanwhile, he had set aside animals, right? What do? The animals go back into the flock. Why? Because when they the rabbis uproot the Naziris, what does that mean? Retroactively, so he never was a Nazir. And then from there, the dialogue went in the Mishnah. Beis Hillel says, okay, Shammai, don't you see the hektish betos is not a hektish because it was uprooted? So the answer Beis Shammai said, well, they didn't answer him directly because it's different over here, because here you uprooted the whole thing, as opposed to making a mistake when you made the hektish. Remember, Beis Shammai shita is the hektish betos is hektish. Beis Hillel says it's not. They still prove from here, you see hektish betos, that it goes back into the flock, meaning it's a mistake. It's the same thing over here. He was makdish these animals for his naziris, but it turned out at the end he got a tar sadarim. So he didn't, it was no naziris. So the animals go back in the flock. So you see, hektish betos is not hektish. And Beis Shammai said, well, aren't you moted to me in the case of Meiser? Remember, by Meiser, even though you're supposed to count the 10th one, if you count the 9th or the 11th as number 10, they're also kadosh, at least. The only one is Meiser, that was a shlomim, but they're also kadosh. Beis Hillel said, no, that's not because of that. That's because it's automatic. The Torah said that based on the pasuk, we learn out that the 9th or the 11th, not because you counted. It's not your own hektish. So back on that dialogue, we have in the Gemara now, we're at about 10 lines down on the page on Lamed Beis and Ralph. From Rabbi Yirmiyah, Mida Beis Shammai Nishmal Beis Hillel. From Beis Shammai Shita, we can understand Beis Hillel also. How? Lavan Beis Shammai, didn't Beis Shammai say that hektish betos have a hektish, even though Beis Shammai said that if you make a mistake, and you're makdish an animal, I mistake, you thought you're high of an animal, whatever, you wanted to be makdish an animal, it's kadosh anyway. But still, keeping the glory milsa the low shopper nazir. But if it turns out that you weren't really a nazir because you made a mistake and you got a tar arm, teitzei v'tir ba'eder, as we saw in our Mishnah. Even though Beis Shammai says normally hektish betos is hektish, yet if they uprooted the whole thing, if it turns out that there was no naziris at all, it can go back in the flock and it's not hektish. The animals are not hektish. But Beis Hillel nami afagav the amri, even though Beis Hillel says that tmura betos have a tmura, because that's the normal tmura, that when not a normal tmura, but if you made a tmura by mistake, Beis Hillel was moed. Remember, he had the other day that on yesterday's daf that well, he said, why does Beis Shammai say hektish betos is hektish? Because they learned that from tmura. So Beis Hillel said tmura is different because the first animal was kadosh already. Tmura is you have animal A is kadosh, and you said B should be like A. So that's different because A was already kadosh, but to make something kadosh lechatchila, the toes doesment work according to Beis Hillel. But Beis Hillel does say that tmur betos is tmur. What does that mean? If I meant to say that I thought A is an ola, and I said I want to make B like A and ola, but I said B should be. I said it was an ola, and I wanted to make it ola, but I said hareza tmura shlamim. I made a mistake when I said it. It's still a tmura, even according to Beis Hillel. So Beis Hillel nami afagav the tmura betos is a mistake. Is still a tmura. I meant to say tmura. I meant to say tmura has raised tmuras ola, and I said tmura shlamim. It works. Hanimili hechad the isa liker hektish, right? Aval hechad in this aker iker hektish is aker namitura. So the lashon is mashma. That's only when the main thing, like A was kadosh, but when you uprooted A, so B is also uprooted. That's what it sounds like in the Gemara. But Rashi doesn't say that. Interesting. Rashi says that it means, where does Beis Hillel say that tmura betos is tmura? If I meant to say ola and I said or is it tmura shlamim, then it works as a tmura. But if I separated already, I separated the animal. Rashi says, Rashi down in the wide lines, about halfway down in the wide lines, hani mile. So let's say he set aside an animal for an as a tmur ola. A is an ola, and I set aside B as an ola. The chazon raised a tmur shlam, and I said this is a tmur shlam, even though I already given the hifrisha, I already set aside this animal as a tmura for an ola. And then I made a mistake. So Rashi explains it differently than the lashon. The lashon sounds like, where do you say tmura betos is a tmura? Where the iker hecha the isa, the lashon of the Gemara sounds to me like hanimil hecha the isa leiker hektish, when their main hektish is there. A is hektish. Avlechem the soccer iker hektish, but if the main hektish is uprooted, then it's soccer nami tmura. That's what it sounds like in the Gemara. But Rashi says it doesn't mean that. Rashi says that's when he meant to say tmura sola, and he said tmura shlamim. That's a mistake. That's still valid as a tmura. But if he set aside the animal already, and I said he set aside this is a tmura sola, and then I said raise a tmura shlamim, that doesn't work. That doesn't work. So I made a mistake. In other words, let's say I had two animals. I had an Ola and I had a Shlomim. And I wanted to set aside a third animal, number 3. And I meant to say, I raise a Tmura Ola. And I said, what I do is for a Shlomim. So it is a Tmura for the Shlomim. That's my mistake. But if I set aside number 3 as a Tmura for Ola, I said, this is my Tmura for Ola in my mind. I set it aside as a Tmura for Ola. And then I set it as a Tmura Shlomim. That's a mistake that doesn't work. That's how Rashi explains Shad in the Gemara in the Rabbanan. Just like Beis Shammai, who holds that Hegdish B'tos is Hegdish, yet if the whole thing is uprooted, the Nizir is uprooted, it's not Hegdish. The same thing. The Beis Hillel agrees with the same concept, that even the Beis Hillel also said that Tmur B'tos is a Tmura, but that's only where the words were mistaken. In other words, I meant to say number 3 is like number 1, and I said it's like number 2. So I said it wrong, but it's, then it becomes like number 2. I have number 1 and number 2, one's an Ola, one's a Shlom, and I meant to say 3 is like number 1, and I said it's number 2. Yeah, it is wholly like number 2. But if I set aside number 3, and in my mind I said it's going to be a Tmur for number 1, and then I said number 2, then it doesn't work. That's how Rashi learns the Gemara. Amar Mar. And here's another example where this lashon of Nazir is just like we have in the Darim, that the lashon is like very much Yerushalmi lashon. Why? Because Amar Mar in Bavli we always have is in a memra. In other words, there's a ruling in the Gemara of Raisa, and now we want to analyze it. So we said, oh, Amar Mar, what did Mar say? What did the rabbi say? Blah blah blah, and then we're going to explain it. But here, this is going on the Mishnah. Amar Mar, Iatamodim Sheilu Karolachi Asir. Remember, Beis Shammai retorted to Beis Hillel. What are you saying? That Hegdish B'tos is not Hegdish? You're also motivated by Meiser that if I said number 9 or number 11, that's Kadosh. But it's not, you don't use that lashon Amar Mar on a Mishnah, right? You would say in the Mishnah, say something about the Mishnah, it'd be a different house of Mishnah, but it's Amar Mar, that's also lashon Yerushalmi. That's how Rashi explains it. Itmar. Meiser, so we all agree, right? When you count the Meiser, you count 10 animals. If you said number 9 is Meiser, and number 11 is Meiser, they're also, let's say, Shlomim. So Itmar Meiser, Rav Nachman Amar Tosi V'lo Kavnaso. It only works when you made a mistake. When you said number 9 is Meiser or number 11 is Meiser, like you said number 9 is number 10 or number 11 is number 10, it only works when you made a mistake. But if you did it on purpose, it doesn't work. That's what Rav Nachman says. Rav Chisda Rav Arfuna says no. If I made a mistake and it works and it's kadosh, certainly if I did it on purpose. Amalei Rav Nachman. So Rav said to Rav Nachman, who said no, it only works when you made a mistake, not when you did it by kavana. According to you, who said only if he did it by mistake, but not if he did it on purpose. If he said number 9, I said that's number 10. Ooh, that's number 9. It's a nice animal. Let's give that one for Meiser. I made that one on purpose, number 10, or I made number 11, number 10. So according to you, it says that doesn't work if he did it on purpose. The come Beis Shammai. So when Beis Shammai said to Beis Hillel, "Iatamodim sheilu kar l'chi asiyu lasi achieve." Aren't Beis Shammai said to Beis Hillel, "What you don't hold of Hegdish B'tos? What about when you called the 9th one number 10, you called the 10th one number 9, and then the 11th one is number 10? Sheshloshtem kedushin. Even the 10th one, which you called number 9, is kaddish because they're all holy." The shtiku Beis Hillel didn't really respond to that. Beis Hillel said, they responded by saying something else. They said, well, that has nothing to do with the person. That God made those things holy. The shtiku Beis Hillel, what did Beis Hillel did? They were quiet in that sense. So they answered something else. Why didn't they answer something else? Why didn't they just say, they say out there, don't give me a proof from Meiser, you're talking to me from Meiser. Meiser is different because it only works when you make a mistake. Beis Hillel was quiet. They answered him because they said Meiser is different because the pasuk made it kaddish. But why don't you tell them from what you're saying? You're saying if you made a mistake and you called all 3 kadosh in one form or another, or you called number 10 number 9, number 9 number 10, number 11 number 10, they're all kadosh. Why didn't they say so? You see, Hegdish B'tos says Hegdish. Why didn't Beis Hillel say no? Beis Hillel says different. It only works when you make a mistake. What do you want to? What do you mean? You want to ask me a kasha? Beis Shammai says to Beis Hillel, how do you say that the Hegdish B'tos is not Hegdish? What about Meiser? So you should have answered by Meiser. It only works when you make a mistake. It doesn't work when you did by kavana. If that's the case, according to Rav Nachman, who says it only works by mistake, not by kavana. Why didn't he answer that? Rav Shim Barashi, Hainu Time, no, that's not a good kasha. They couldn't say that. The reason that Hainu Time they couldn't have said that because Beis Shammai could have retorted to Kal V'chomeru. He says, what would Beis Hillel have said? Meiser is different because it only works by mistake, not on purpose. So Beis Shammai could have retorted, well, it's a kal v'chomer. Ma meiser she'ein a kodesh b'kavana. Meiser, which doesn't work b'kavana. Kodesh b'tos works by mistake. Hegdish she'kodesh b'kavana lo kol shkein certainly should work by mistake. If meiser, which doesn't work, you can't be meiser, you can't make a mistake b'kavana, but it works by mistake. So when you made a regular hegdish, which works by kavana, certainly should work by mistake. So that's what they could have answered. So therefore, it's not a kasha on Rav Nachman. Below it, the Gemara says no, it is a kasha of Nachman. The hegdish b'dayk the marito. That's not a good kal v'chomer because hegdish depends on the person. By meiser, it depends on the 10th animal that walks out, whether you sanctified it or not. It's automatically the 10th one is kadosh. Whereas a regular animal that's chulin and you're making a kadosh, it depends on your das. So you can't say a kal v'chomer from a meiser. Malach meiser, which doesn't work, but kavana works by mistake. Hegdish, which works by kavana, certainly should work by mistake. No, because hegdish depends on your kavana. Therefore, it's a good kasha. This that the Gemara said, Rabbi said to Rav Nachman, according to you, that Tosu kavanaso. Why didn't they still retort to Beis Shammai? Don't ask me a kasha from meiser because meiser only works the toes, not the kavana, and therefore it is a kasha on Rav Nachman. So apparently, when we say meiser works by mistake, it certainly works when he did it the kavana. Meiser Rav Nachman of a tauso below kavana. Rav Chisda, we go like Rav Chisda and Rav Huna say that tauso v'kol shkei kavana. In other words, when you do meiser, if you made a mistake and you called number 9, number 10, number 10, number 9, and number 11, number 10, or you did it on purpose, it works either way. Says the Gemara, says the Mishnah like this, near the bottom of the page. A man made a naziris, right? And he planned on using some animals that he had in the barn for his because he knows what he was doing. What he's accepted naziris upon himself, meaning that he's can't violate the 3 prohibitions of drinking wine, shaving, and being tamei l'meis. And he knows he has to bring karbanos at the end of the 30-day period. He's got to bring the karbanos. And he had a kavanah to bring the 30. Those animals were set aside. A chatas ola and a shlam. A chatas is a female animal. An ola, a female lamb. A ola is a male lamb, and a shlamim is a ram. So misha nadar benazir. He went to bring his kavanah. He went into the barn to bring his kavanah. So the animals were gone. They were stolen, lost or stolen. Now, when he made his naziris, were the animals there? If the animals were there, he became a nazir before. Again, let's take a simple example. April is an easy month, right? Because we know that April, if you weren't born here in Israel, you know that April is the days. Most people, Israelis have no clue about the days, how many days are in the Goyish months. Anyway, so here he said, let's say he made his naziris on April 1st, and the police came and they checked the fingerprints. It turns out the animals were stolen on April 5th. Right. So when he took his naziris on April 1st, the animals were there. Im ad shalom nignava weren't stolen yet. He made his naziris before the animals were actually stolen. A razor nazir, he can't get a Pesach for that. He was listening. He goes to the rabbi. He said, "Listen, I have no animals. Had I known that I didn't have the animals, I wouldn't have become a nazir. I know how expensive it is. I don't have other animals. What am I going to do?" But the animals were stolen subsequent to his naziris. What is that called? Nolad. That event took place after his naziris. And we learned before, we had it in the Dharm, Ein Poskim Nolad, right? It's a machlokas, but we pass it Ein Poskim Nolad. In other words, what is a good Pesach? I regret it. I thought I could handle it. I didn't handle whatever the netter was. I thought I could abstain from eating oranges or eating hot dogs or whatever. I couldn't. So I regret it. Poskim b'charata. Or I didn't realize this at the time. But let's say something happened subsequent to the time I made the naziris, which changed the situation. I couldn't have anticipated that. He couldn't have anticipated the animals were going to be stolen. So the Ein Poskim Minol, that's a new thing. That's something that was just born now. And Ein Poskim Minol, so the Mishnah says, Imad Shelo Nikdim Behemto Nazir, he became a Nazir before the animals were raised a Nazir. You can't get a Pesach for that. In Misha Nikdim Behemto Nazir. Let's say though, March 25th, before he became a Nazir, last time he checked, he goes into the barn once every few weeks. The animals were there March 25th. On April 1st, when he made the neder, he figured, okay, the animals are there. I'll become a nazir. But the truth is that, and now he finds that the animals are gone. The animals were gone before he made the neder. The animals were gone on March 25th. April 1st, he made the neder. He became a nazir after the animals were stolen. Ain't a nazir. It's a good pesach. That's a good hatara. You can go to the rabbis and say, well, had you known that the animals were stolen at the time, had you known that you didn't have the animals, I wouldn't have made the neder. That's a good hatara sadarim. Ain't a nazir, right? Vizu tos, this mistake, ta Nachum Hamadi. Later on in history, Nachum Hamadi made this mistake as well. And later on, we'll see at the time of the Mishnah, we'll see. And he made this mistake as well. What did he say? And again, you understand the concept. If at the time you accepted the neder, the situation which caused you to get a touchdown was already taken place, that's a good touchdown. But if it only took place later, that's a new circumstance. You couldn't have anticipated that. Ain't post manola. So this happened with Nachum Hamadi. Sha'olu Nizir Menagola. When they came back after the Golus, they came back and they found the Matzu Beis Hamikdash Chara. They found the Beis Hamikdash was destroyed. Beis Hamikdash was destroyed, right? Amr Lahem Nachum Hamadi said, Ilu Ha'isam, after the second Beis Hamikdash was destroyed, Ilu Ha'isam Yodam She Beis Hamikdash Chara. Had you known the Beis Hamikdash was destroyed, Beis Hamikdash was destroyed, you have no way to bring your kabbanos. If somebody becomes a nazir today, let's say he keeps on saying, there's no way he can't bring karbanos today, so he can't really finish his naziris. Yeah, and he can't bring any of the karbanos. He could shave, but he can't bring karbanos. Go to the mikvah, he can't bring karbanos. You can't. If you're a nazir, you're a nazir for life. If you accept naziris today, it's like now you can get a tar sadar maybe, right? Okay, but let's say you're advanced to the Beis Hamikdash, right? So you made a mistake. I didn't realize that I didn't realize that you had to bring the karbanos today. I thought it was only yesteryear. I didn't think you had to bring it. Whatever the mistake was, you get out of it. But there's no normal protocol for getting out of the naziris because you can't bring your karbanos. So what happened here was people came up from the Golus and they said, okay, they're going to be all over. They're going to come up there to Israel and they accepted upon themselves naziris. And they came there. They found the base which was destroyed. Had you known the base that the base was destroyed, Hayisam Nozrim, would you have made a naziris? Amrulo, they said no, we would have made it Tiran Nachum Hamadi. In other words, the people had accepted naziris when the Beis Hamikdash was still there. By the time they came up, they didn't have WhatsApp and emails and stuff, phones. So by the time they came up there, Beis Hamikdash was destroyed. So Nachum Hamadi said, had you known that the Beis Hamikdash was going to be destroyed, would you have made it? They said no. So he was matar Tiran Nachum Hamadi. When it came before the rabbis, Amru, what did they say there? Amru lo, they told him no. Kol she nazir ad shalochara Beis Hamikdash nazir mishachar Beis Hamikdash nazir. If you accept the naziris before the Beis Hamikdash was destroyed, so that means you have no way out because the Beis Hamikdash, when you made the naziris, there is a Beis Hamikdash. Now a new circumstance has come up. What's a new circumstance? Beis Hamikdash isn't there. I have no way to bring the karbanos. So I want to look for it, but that's nola. That's a new circumstance. That doesn't work for Atar Sadarim when it comes to this. Therefore, that's why if they made the naziris after the Beis Hamikdash was destroyed, but they didn't know. They didn't know, but they didn't know that the Beis Hamikdash wasn't there anymore. But when they made those who made the naziris on the way up after the Beis Hamikdash was destroyed, they checked the calendar and they knew when it was destroyed. If they made naziris after the Beis Hamikdash was destroyed, had I known the Beis Hamikdash was already destroyed, I wouldn't have made that. Had I known that the animals were already stolen on March 25th, I wouldn't have become a nazir. That's a good atar sadarim, ain't a nazir. That's what the Gemara says over here. So, Beis Hamikdash was destroyed already. In other words, when they found Matzah Beis Hamikdash destroyed, that after the Bayis Sheni was destroyed already, this is what happened with Nachum Hamadi and the rabbis. Amar Rabba. So Rabba says, Shatfu Rabban Rabbi Eliezer. The Rabbanan overruled Rabbi Eliezer. Right? They overruled Rabbi Eliezer. What did Rabbi Eliezer say? But why? We had smachlokas before. Looking b'shisasayu. Ditzanan. We had back in the Durham Hoschen Benola. Right? Can you use that as a Pesach? Had you known that this circumstances changed? Had you known that they were going to change? You didn't know they were going to change. I didn't know this was going to happen. Did Rabbi Eliezer says yes. That's a good Pesach. That's Rabbi Eliezer sheet. The Chacham says no. Osrin Chacham Aser. That's in the Durham. Over here in our Mishnah, though, do we see the machlokas in our Mishnah too? Our Mishnah doesn't mention the machlokas. Rav Lezer has fallen away. Nazir is after Nadarim. Rashi explains it, and he explains it back. It'll be back at the beginning of Dharma also, right? That beginning of Sota, that Nadarim is after Ksubas because we have Parak Hamadir in Ksubas, and then Nazir is after Nadarim because Nazir is a kind of Nadarim. Nazir was learned after Nadarim. In Nadarim, Rav Lezer argued with Rabbanan and said, Posfin Benolad. And the Chum said, no. Here, when it comes to Nazir already, Rav Eliezer, Meir Medayim. He picked up, he gave up. He didn't, he conceded to the rabbis that ain't Posfin Ben Nazir. So that's what he says, that the Rabbanan overruled Rav Eliezer, and they made him agree with their sheet. The Tanan in the Dharma, we learn Posfin Ben Nazir, Rav Eliezer Chamosim, right? And therefore, here we don't in the Nazir we don't see the machlokas, or Rav Eliezer conceded. Rava said another important thing. Even though we said you can't use as a Pesach something new that happened after that, you couldn't have foreseen this, right? You couldn't have anticipated this. Listen to this. You could use as a condition for Nola. What do we mean by that? Hechidami. Amri lahon, you tell him, ilu asa inish, had a man come and told you, but Amri lahon, had somebody come and told you, the Chara Beis HaMikdash, miyav reason. That's not a new thing. In other words, the fact that you say, had you known that the Beis HaMikdash would have been destroyed later, would you have made an eder? No, that's something I couldn't have known. But he says, let's say, had somebody come and told you when you made the eder that the Beis HaMikdash was destroyed, or was going to be destroyed, would you have made the eder? No, I wouldn't have made the eder. That's like a condition of Pascha. So you can't use the fact. In other words, had somebody told you, we said, if you accepted Nazir on April 1st, and on April 5th, the animals were stolen from you, that's Nola. You know they were going to be, you couldn't have known they were stolen. But let's say somebody told you on April 1st that, you know what, your animals may be stolen. Maybe so. So if you could tell the guy when he comes to Atas Dharm, had somebody come and told you on April 1st that your animals were about to be stolen, would you have made the neder? No, I wouldn't have made that, because that's not Nola directly, it's a condition for Nola. So that's what he said. Had somebody come and told you the Beis Mikdash was destroyed, the Char Beis Mikdash, would you have made the neder? And that is a good Pesach. Had somebody told you that the Beis Mikdash was going to be, you can't say, the Beis Mikdash was destroyed after I made the neder. I didn't know the Beis Mikdash was going to be destroyed. Of course, that's Nola. That's no good. And therefore you can't, that's not a good Pesach. You couldn't have known that it was going to be destroyed. But had somebody, if the Pesach was, if somebody would have told you that the Beis Mikdash was going to be destroyed, you have made the neder, that's a valid Pesach. That's a valid Pesach. Amar Yosef. Yeah, but Hassan, had I been there, Havi Aminal, I would have told you, I would have told him like this, what do you mean you didn't know the Beis Mikdash was going to be destroyed, right? You didn't know. What do you mean? The Pasuk says, it says, Heichal Hashem, Heichal Hashem, Heichal Hashem. In the Pasuk in Yom, it says 3 times, Heichal Hashem, Heichal Hashem, Heichal Hashem, Hema, Zeb, Hema, Zeb Mikdash Rishon, Mikdash Sheni. It says 3 times there's going to be a Heichal. We know there's going to be 3 Beis HaMikdashes. So if there's 3 Beis HaMikdashes, obviously the first 2 are going to be destroyed. So how could you have not known that the second Mikdash was going to be destroyed? There was going to be a third one. If there's a third one, that means the second one's going to be destroyed. So the answer says, I know they're going to be destroyed. I didn't know when. We know that the second Mikdash was going to be destroyed. They knew that, but they didn't know when. So when what happened? We said that the people who made the Naziris before the Beis HaMikdash was destroyed, they can't use that as a Pesach that the Beis HaMikdash was destroyed, because that's Nola. They didn't know about that. But so he says, but they did know. The answer, they didn't know when. Amar Bai, they didn't know when. It says, Shavuim Shivim Nechtach Alamcha Al Yerkot. There's a Gzeira on your nation and on the your holy city of what? Of 70 Shmitas. Shavuim Shivim, 70, Shuvim 70 times 7. I have 7 years of Shemitah. What's 70 times 7? 70 times 7. 490. 490. Now, how long was the Galus Babel? 70 years, right? 70 years. And the second Beis HaMikdash, when they came back and built it, was 420 years. That's total 420. That the second nation was existed, and the 70 that they were in Babel. This nevuah was to them in the beginning when they went to Babel. It said, there's a gzeira on you for 490 years. What's the 490? The 70 that they were in Babel, and the 420 that the second Beis HaMikdash was existed. Then the Beis HaMikdash was going to be destroyed after a total of 490 years. So they knew it was going to be destroyed. It was going to be destroyed. What do you mean they didn't know? It says there's 3 base of Egypt, so you know the first 2 are going to be destroyed. So well, I didn't know when, but you did know when. You knew after 490 years. So you knew it was going to be destroyed. What year it was going to be? But they didn't know which day. So they knew this year it's going to be destroyed. They knew that 70 years in Babel and 420 years of the base of Egypt. They knew the base of Egypt was going to be destroyed in which year, but they didn't know which day. And therefore, that's how they didn't know. And therefore, it was no lie if they became a Nazir before. And they came up, the people came from Babel near the time the Beit was destroyed. They thought Beit was still there. They came up and they found that it wasn't there. Said, I didn't know it was going to be destroyed. That's not a good Pesach. Somebody told them, had somebody told you when you made the Naziris that it was going to be destroyed, that it was destroyed, would you have made that? That's a good Pesach. But just Pesach of the fact I didn't know it was destroyed, that's not a Pesach. Now, this Mishnah that we have now is what we mentioned. We mentioned history yesterday. 6 guys were walking on the road. First guy says, one guy's coming up. One guy said to him, Hareni Nazir Shizet Ploni. That's not Jim. I'll be a Nazir if that's Jim. That's how Rashi learned it yesterday. Tosas says it a little bit differently. Says that it is a Nazir, I know he's a Nazir. I'm so sure it's a Nazir. It's a way, it doesn't really make a difference how you understand his Lashon, but he didn't really know for sure, right? He says, I'm pretty sure that's Jim. I'm so sure it's Jim, I'll be a Nazir if it's Jim. Rashi learns I'll be a Nazir if it's not Jim. Okay, however he said it, I'll be a Nazir if that's funny, because according to Rashi, I think it's not funny. I think it's not Jim. I'm so sure it's Jim. If it's not Jim, I'll be a Nazir. So I like Rashi's better. Third guy said, or according to Rashi, maybe the guy himself who was coming said, I'll be a Nazir if one of you is a Nazir. In other words, I know one of you for sure is a Nazir. Or She'enachad become Nazir. Fourth guy said, I'll be a Nazir if one of you is not a Nazir, meaning somebody for sure is a Nazir. Or the fifth guy said, Sheshnechem Nazirim, that you're both Nazirim. Shekuchem Nazirim. The sixth guy said that you're all Nazirim. The Shami says, cool Nazirim, because he said Hareni Nazir. Everybody said Hareni Nazir. Whatever the stipulation was, I'm a Nazir if it is Jim. I'm a Nazir if it's not Jim. I'm a Nazir if you guys are. I believe Nazir if one of you is not, because one of you for sure is. That's how Rashi learned yesterday. You're not Nazir. If you're all Nazir, I'll be a Nazir. As I expect you not all to be a Nazir. However, the lashon was, you could learn it differently. Rashi tells us other Rishonim learn it differently, but the key is Beis Shammai says they're all Nazir because he said Hareni Nazir, right? It's very so, like even by mistake. Again, Beis Shammai Shita is that Hegdish B'tos is Hegdish, Nazir B'tos is Naziris, and here's all Nazir. Beis Hillel Eino Nazir Elamishal on a sky mitvaro. So Beis Hillel says the only one who's a Nazir is the one whose words weren't fulfilled. Sounds a little bit strange. Weren't fulfilled. I would be enough if, let's say, I say I want to be a Nazir if that's not Jim, and it turns out it's not Jim. I should be a Nazir, right? It should be if my words are according. Rav Tarfon Omer Einechem Nazir. Nobody's a Nazir here. Why? Because Rav Tarfon says it's got to be very clear. It can't be conditional. Even though they all said these conditions, but they weren't 1,000,000% sure that it's going to be. They're just pretty sure, right? But they weren't. It was conditional. No, nobody's a Nazir. Here, Tia Lachorav. Let's say the 6 guys were watching that guy Jim come. Is that Jim? Is it not Jim? He saw them coming, and he was a Jew. They were whatever. He turned around and ran away. Here, Tia. What does here Tia mean? He was deterred. We say you turn back, ran back. That's how here Tia in Hebrew is to deter, right? Harta'ah. So he turned back, and now they can't. They don't know who he was. He turned away. He ran away. So nobody can know, right? Ain't a Nazir. He's not a Nazir. According to everybody, he's not a Nazir. Shimon says no. Yomar im if it's like my words are any Nazir choba. Im lav any Nazir. In other words, what you should say is, if I was right that it's not Jim, then I'm a chayav as a Naziris. If not, I'll anyway volunteer to give a Naziris. That's what Rav Shimon says. Rashi says Rav Shimon goes to Shitasa. Rav Shimon Tameid Omer Safek Naziris Lachmer. Back on Daf Ches we had. Remember, Safek Nadarim is l'chumra, but Safek Naziris is l'kula. Rav Shimon says it's l'chumra. So Rav Shimon goes with his shita. Rav Shimon l'tameid Omer Safek Naziris is l'hachmer. So he says, you know what? If it's a Safek now, we don't know. There's no way to determine it. Right? Rav Tarfon said either way, even if it is Jim or it's not Jim, nobody's a Nazir. Right? But let's say the guy turned back And if you hold, right, if you turn back and there's no way to know, then nobody's a nazir. Suffix to suffix, you go l'kula, according to everybody. Even if you hold like Beis Hillel, presumably, you're not a nazir because it's a suffix. Rav Shimon says you have to be machmer, the chumrah, so therefore you have to keep naziris anyway. If my words were fulfilled, I am a nazir, and if not, I'll be a nazir in a dava anyway. Says Gemara, Mishal and Askam is more of a ma'av nazir. Let's try Beis Hillel. Beis Hillel says, "Ain't a nazir Mishal Shalom Askam only if his words weren't fulfilled." What do you mean? If they weren't fulfilled, he shouldn't be a nazir. Mishal Askam is more of a ma'av nazir. So change the words to Mishal Askam with var. His words were fulfilled. Abaya Omar. Abaya says, no, could go into Omar. He said, and changes the words a little bit now. I say it's I'm going to be a nazir if that guy is Jim, and if it's not him, still Havoy knows I'll be a nazir anyway. That's how he said it. He said it like that. In other words, Umay. So what does it mean? In other words, it means that even if his first words weren't makuyim, but if he said afterwards, I'll be a nazir either way, then they're makuyim. That'll be the dochik answer. Better to give the first answer. Rav Yehuda says, Mishan Askam with Varv according to Beis Hillel. So nazir. Let's say we're on Shabbos' Daf if you haven't noticed. If he turned back, he's not a nazir, right? Time mishum dertia because he turned back. But if he did show up here, have a nazir, he would be a nazir. What does it mean? Who's this last part of the Mishnah? We had a three of machlokas in the Mishnah. The Shammai says everybody's a nazir. He said already nazir, whatever your stipulation is a nazir. Beis Hillel says no, only if your words were makuyam, let's say. And Tarfon says nobody's a nazir over here. Why? Because it's got to be very clear when you make the nazirs. It can't be stipulated. Nazirs has to be lahafli. It's got to be very clear. If it wasn't clear, it's conditional. It doesn't work. So Bar now says, well, who is this last part of the Mishnah? He turns around and he's not a nazir. But if he didn't turn around, he would be a nazir if he continued. The time money, who does that go like? Elaim Rab Tarfon. On which daf are we now? On Sundays. We're just on Sundays because Shabbos' daf is full of tosusin from the previous days. It's not even this. It's not even today's. This is all from previous days. Elaim Rab Tarfon. Miyavi nazir. How could it be a nazir? Kiva the b'shata the nazir lo yada iplani hu ilav. Rab Tarfon says if it's not clear at the time you made the nazir, it's not clear, then he's not a nazir, right? Below, kiva the b'shata nazir lo yada iplani hu below michal naziris. Vatanya we learn Rabbi Yehuda Omer Mishum Rab Tarfon ein echad me'am nazir if he shall learn naziris el lafla. What was that case? What did he say over there? That nobody's a nazir, right? Rabbi Shimon Tarfon. Nobody's a nazir unless it's very, very clear. So it can't be Rav Tarfon. Ella Rav Yehuda decree. So who does it go like? It's not Elam Rav Tarfon. He's not Rav Yehuda decree. Rav Yehuda of the pile. What was the pile? We had that case before back in the Durham, and he had it here too back in Festatanya. Man says, "I'll be a nazir if this pile of produce has 100 core, a large amount." He went to the core and he went to the pile and was gone. No way to know if there was 100 core there or not. Osha of it was stolen or lost. Rab Shimon Oser, Rab Shimon goes the Chumrah. Rab Safik you go the Chumrah. Rab Yehuda Matzah, Rab Yehuda says it's mutter. Rab Shimon Savar Kivin the Ilu Lo Nigna. Since if it wasn't stolen, Dilma maybe there would have been 100 core there. Babi Nazar Hashanami. Now he's also Nazar. Vachanami Kivin the Iyasla Kaman the Adina and the Ploni Have. I would have known that it was. Abi Nazar Hashanami Abi Nazar. So therefore, who does it go like? It goes like a Yehuda Matir. What do we say here? He says, he would be a nazir. If it's Reb Tarfon, it can't be Reb Tarfon because we already explained he wouldn't know it. Elamai, Ve'ela Mechal Naziris. Ella Reb Yehuda decree. We have Reb Yehuda decree, meaning it comes out like Reb Yehuda really that we say over there that Reb Yehuda says is matter, and Reb Shimon Savar, since if it wasn't, we would know. Meaning by suffix, Reb Yehuda says it's a suffix we don't know. Reb Shimon Savar, Kivin the Ilah negative Domavi Meya, maybe they're Hashanami then Hachanami, Kivin the Ilas Lakaman, the Adin of the Ploni Ave, we don't know Havi Nazir. Hashanami, Havi Nazir is also Nazir now. So it depends on that machlokas Reb Yehuda and Reb Shimon over there by the creed. So now we've really finished Shabbos' daf, and we're on Sunday's daf, where we'll pick it up from the Mishnah on Sunday. On the podcast, I put up Shabbos' daf from last time, just for review, because this is a little bit confusing, this Gemara. On Shabbos' daf, we take this on the podcast, it takes you from Lamed Beis and Beis, from right after the Mishnah, Amar Rabba Shafu Rabbanan, where they overruled Rabbi Lezer, all the way till the end of the parak. So if you listen to the podcast, you'll get a little bit ahead and come out on Sunday stuff down to the end of the parak. But we'll pick it up on Sunday, Mitzvah Shem, from the Mishnah on Lamed Dalet Amud Aleph. Shabbat Shalom l'kulam.
Shabbat Shalom. Beautiful.